And so we have to make sure that the way we come together is light and fun for us to understand and work on the planet, and for on our own selves as well, I think. So yeah, I hope you're all up. I hope your mothers are bringing you coffee, chai, everything that you need to stay up in the class, because it would be nice to have you all active in the class and listening. The course is called Introduction to Environmental Sciences, and my name is Fozia. And I'll quickly run you through the course today. Let's set the tone for expectations for myself as well as from you, because I think some of you get intimidated with the readings, with the writings, with the sort of assignments that you get. So we'll make sure that that's all a little more clearer today. So I joined LUMS 2 years ago, and when I joined, my preference was research. So I joined as a postdoc, and at the time, of course, there was no COVID. So I really enjoyed coming to research, back to research after the PhD, because that's what we are trained for. I've done my BS and MS in environmental sciences from Fatma Jannah and then from NUST respectively. And after that, I went to Oxford to do my DPhil in engineering science. My area of research has mostly been water, wastewater treatment. At Oxford, I looked at advanced wastewater treatment to convert municipal wastewater into clean drinking water. Because of my training in environmental sciences, it's sort of a field that allows you to go beyond the traditional ways in which science is designed, right? Generally, in Pakistan, you focus more on the basic sciences and then expand that, dig a little deeper into that. For me, I think it was important to go back to the society. So I love the science part of environmental sciences. I love the research angle where you can just spend hours and hours in the lab trying to understand a simple thing, and then, you know, infer a lot of things from there. But I also love going back to the community. And I do this because I come from a very small community. I originally am from Hunza. I was born and brought up in Gilgit. A lot of things that I was taught in the class in my undergrad environmental sciences made sense to me because I was from such a critical ecosystem, and also because I had seen a lot of things right on my face, right in front of me, and the changes therein that happened within this short lifetime that I had. And so I appreciate the knowledge that we gain from being in the field, and the knowledge we gain from speaking with people, which is why this course is very important for me, because I didn't realize when COVID happened, I had the choice, and the labs were shut. I had the choice of teaching, and I decided to teach this, of course, because there's no environmental science stream at the School of Science and Engineering. And I started this, and I'm hoping to start a minor and then eventually a major in this at the School of Science and Engineering as well. And I'm hoping that you guys will set the tone for that. I'm learning a lot, and this experience so far has been very, very rewarding, which is why I want to continue to my research and my discussions or classroom side by side. Okay, let me quickly go through the messages to make sure that I haven't missed anything. That's okay. Some of you have genuine issues for keeping your cameras off. That's okay. Try and wake up, because we will be jumping into some of the concepts very soon. Awesome. So so that's like a glimpse of the course. I also wanted to tell you that last year, the students, when they participated, made the class so enriching, not only for me, but also for themselves and their peers. And I want to make sure that you can do the same, that you have the liberty to do the same. because it's not just like, for me, in this class, I do not want to be a one-way process where only I am teaching and you're listening. If there are points where you just want to jump in and say something, raise your hand, use the chat function. Just bring your voice to the podium, and whenever you can interact between you, because I know you come from diverse fields, and that's why I've used platforms like Padlet this time, because I realized that there was a lot of learning between students as well, specifically when they got into groups, they got into breakout rooms, everyone was learning something from their peers. And I'm trying to maximize that side of the learning as well. So it's not one or two-way stream where we learn from each other, but also so many other connections that you can make between yourselves to make sure that you are also benefiting from the experiences that other people have in your course. The learning outcomes were outlined in your course outline, so I'll not repeat them. But what I will say is that the actual learning outcome that I expect from the course is to create agents of change. And by agents of change, I mean people who genuinely care. And it's not easy to be genuinely caring about the planet. And the reason being, there are not many people who have that sort of ecological empathy where you feel for an animal, or you feel for the environment the way you would feel for one of your own beloved. And unfortunately, because that has been the case, the planet has come to the state that it has come to. And we kind of want to make sure that the people who are speaking, who are taking these stages, who are trying to change the pace at which we are going towards growth in this planet, it's actually run by people who care, and people who actually want to leave a better planet for the future generations that are to come. And I know, and we keep saying this, even when I was in your place at your age, we were also told that time is critical, that we are running out of time, that it's about time that we do it. If we don't do it now, it will be too late. I like to look at it in another way. If you got a chance to read the IPCC's recent report, where they said we've already passed the tipping point, we have damaged the planet to the point where it's difficult to be coming back. I really think that with all of you, with all of us, change is possible. That if all of us decide to change today, change our consumer habits and our behaviors today, we could actually bring the planet back to a healthier state. And so that's the actual outcome that I expect from the course. I hope that you're all excited and motivated to be those agents of change in your circle without being ridiculed and without caring to be ridiculed about it. And that care, of course, should be genuine. Like I said, I want the class format to be driven by discussions, ask questions. It's an open space. The reason why I say it's an open and non-judgmental space is because there are people who understand the science very well. And then there are people who may have forgotten what they were taught in their 6th, 7th grade on biogeochemical cycles, or some of the basic sciences about atmosphere and soil. And that's okay. I will not judge you for that, and I hope that your peers will not judge you for that. And I want you to know that it's okay for you to ask any question, and it's okay for you to put any comment without the fear of judgment. And then I was hoping, and I have designed the course such that there would be some field visits. I've already discussed 2 industry visits so that I could divide you in a group of 2. And then you could discuss it between yourselves. And then hopefully like a lab visit, because I'll be telling you about the environmental parameters that we talk about in the reports, and it'd be nice for you to come and see it in the class. And I want the course to be an experiential learning, so please do participate. Like I said, do not hesitate. And in any case, I'm a teacher and I want everyone to be in the class, and I want to be a little more strict than I generally am in the class. So my sense of humor is terrible. So I had to use Greta, and I can already see, because no one dislikes Greta. I think Greta's Greta is a green queen of the time. So I just wanted to say, please do not miss the class. That is my way of saying, how dare you miss the class? So make sure you do not skip the class, you're in the class, and you keep that energy and momentum running for all of us. And my expectations are not very high, but they're also not very low. We'll just be revising some of the basic sciences that you already know about. I did not include a lot of calculations last time because some of the people were very intimidated by those. I had added a lot of equations because I thought that to explain the concepts, it would be important to add some basic equations. And then I sort of wanted to build from very easy to difficult. So some of the concepts were indeed very difficult that people know in a 400 level course, because I wanted you to go, or wanted the students to go with the flavor of the journey and the complication that an environmental problem gets into. And when I speak about, for example, the pH, which you probably know about, the acidity or basicity of an environmental situation, I sort of wanted to explain why it is so important when it comes to, for example, a plant taking up a heavy metal and how that would impact your health. But this time I've tried to reduce a lot of equations, and I've probably given more space to more basic sciences so that it all makes sense to you. And I hope that you see that. But like I said, I'm very open to feedback in the class, and I really appreciate when students are honest and tell me what worked or what didn't work in the class, because that way then I can fix the way I teach during the class rather than at the end of the semester finding out that you weren't able to walk through the lessons. We can decide on the office hours. I'm sure that we can think about ways to entertain everyone. If the decided office hours clash with some of your classes, you can email and then maybe have appointments other than the office hour as well. I am way busier this year than I was last year. So last year I was literally available 24 hours a day, but this time that would not be the case. But I think for you, I can still make time. So feel free to reach out whenever you have any problem, whatever you want to understand more, you're more than welcome to. I use this textbook because it's very simpler and it's very nicely written. Used it last year as well. Don't think many students engaged from reading the book. This year, I'll encourage you to read it because the chapters are really small and they give you a sense of the complexity. But in a nice and simple way, which we'll be establishing in the class as well. But it's nice to go back and read on some of the readings. I'll try to keep the additional readings short and fun, but they will be assigned before the class. The grading, and I'm thinking of changing one of this depending on how the format of the class is. We'll have, last time I had a lot of weightage for midterm. So basically the midterm, the final term, and the project made most of the percentage of the class. This time I've made sure that you get points for both written and oral participation in the class. So the written CPs that you do via Padlet, and then the spoken CP, or even the written CP on Padlet in the class, that will all work towards your marks. And then maybe I'll assign a few more points for attendance as well, just to keep you all up in the morning. And I really enjoyed the course project that I gave people, and it was very, so I like people coming from their own space experiences. So I asked people to use their own area of expertise, because in a 100 level course, I cannot turn you into an expert of environmental sciences. So what I generally ask people is to start. So for example, there were students from English department last year, and I'd asked them to review literature that's written with an environmental lens. I can already see questions. When it comes to marks, you guys are just awake. I know how to engage you in the class now, because I'll just bring marks up and everyone will be active. So basically the course project can be individual or in groups. Like I said, I really enjoy people coming in. Last time, for example, someone from computer sciences did a whole transportation of, how the wind direction and the weather conditions change the way the soot from a brick kiln settles at a certain point in the day, depending on the direction of the wind, where would the smoke end up and whose health would be at stake. So like those are the kind of things that I didn't teach in the class, like I talked about in the class, but then they used their programming skills or whatever they were taught to visualize it. And similarly, someone else used another software that they were taught in the economics to model one of my my PhD project, part of my PhD project, which is really interesting as well. And then, like I said, people came from their own area of expertise and discussed, for example, literature on environment. This time I'll try to make it a little more uniform. So I think this time I'll ask you to focus on an issue, and I'll give you the opportunity to focus to build on that. So that's the reason why I put the question that I put, and I will hopefully discuss it in a minute. But yeah, that's basically the final score. The ethics, I think you all know about it. There's zero tolerance. We all have each other's numbers in the groups. I really like to be respectful of people's space, personal and social. So let's just make sure that we are respectful of each other's privacy, but people are capable of exploiting vulnerable people. And if that is the case, and that can happen in any setup, please make sure that we do not have any tolerance for that degree of cheating or breaching of privacy or getting into people's personal spaces. So make sure that you do not have any tolerance for that. But I'm sure you've been told this plenty of times in other courses as well. I personally am very open, and I would never not respond to your queries, but I would like it if you keep it formal within the group and via email, because then that makes it easy for me. And I'm sure that the same can be said for your peers. Otherwise, we are like I said, very open, very friendly community that we build over a period of time. If you need any help, there are some emails that you should know about, and please make sure that you use these facilities because they're there to support and facilitate you. Okay, and in terms of modules of the course, by the way, is there any comment, any question that any one of you wants to put? Because I would really love to. Yes, Zain.
Ma'am, is the grading relative or absolute?
So I was thinking relative, but last time someone also recommended, so I have to decide this now. But I think I'll keep it relative.
Sure.
Because I think that helps, because sometimes depending on, I don't know how I grade because the rubrics are just in information. I like the relative grading more, because then sometimes very low scores can be like we can give them a better grade that way as well, and people who are in the upper stream also benefit. Anything else? So hopefully relative for now. That's what I have in mind. Okay, I'm looking at the chat. No more questions. All right. So no more comments. Okay. So in terms of module, if you must have looked at the outline already. We'll try and understand the basic sciences. It's everything that you've read from your, I would say between 5th grade and 7th grade science, the atmosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, geosphere, we'll get into those. And the reason why I like to start from there is that everything in the environment is interconnected. The way we are often assured certain problems and certain solutions are not, they're not as straight and simple. So let's for example, take an example of a chemical that I produce in the lab that is able to remove plastic from the ocean, right? And I would prove it via science. So for example, in the lab, I'll make a solution, I'll put plastic in it, I'll make this chemical, I'll remove the plastic. And then I will report it and everyone will clap and applaud. But then when I take the chemical to the environment, the plastic is not the only chemical that I have invented or synthesized is going to interact with. It's way more complicated. The controls that I created in the lab, for example, for the temperature, for the conditions, for mixing, for certain nutrients that should be there, will not be the same in the environment. And so any invention that happens in the lab is not under a controlled condition, is not going to be a final solution to an environmental problem, because with the context, all the conditions will vary. And that's why your chemical will not be a one solution fits all, or every community problem. So that was just an example of why we need to think more about the connections that all of these spheres have, and how they impact one another, and how they impact our lives, and how we impact these spheres, and have therefore complicated the environment. Then I'd like to talk about the resources, what we have, then how we've exploited it. So I give a case study, but also then about how we can control these things. So we will look at the pollution control techniques. Then because you're all super diverse, I also have to make sure that some projects come in that are bringing multiple lenses into the course. So IEE-EIA, which is the Environmental Impact Assessment, is one of those management tools where before you start a project, you have to write the whole socio-economic aspect of the project while it's being built, when it will be built, and past it being built. And that way, you all get engaged, and that way you will know in this class why your opinions are important. And then finally to the laws, to how do we ensure that these things are actually in place and taken care of from the governance perspective, whether that's international or national. And then I focus a little bit on action. As I said, I expect you to be agents of change. So I'm hoping that you will do that in the class through your projects, but also there will be one role play, which hopefully will play in a physical setting, in an in-person setting, and then your visit, at least one, otherwise two, but that depends on whether your Saturdays will be free, because I don't think we can do it in the assigned class time. So I think that's a discussion that we need to have sooner or later as well. Okay. So I asked you to pick an environmental issue that is relevant to you, makes you want to change something about the environment. And I just want to go there and have a look at what you've done. All right, so we're there. So maybe we can take a few comments from all of you who submitted. And also I hope that you see what's happening here. When I gave you this assignment, I didn't think about the varying issues and the varying spaces that we're all in. When I was looking at this, I was just thinking the power that I have as a faculty member and the power that you have as an individual. That this class is literally spread across Pakistan, or our concerns are literally spread across Pakistan and even across the world. And I think that's the beauty of coming into spaces like this. So let's just quickly have a look at what we have, and maybe I can ask a few of you to speak up. Uruj, if you're around, do you want to speak up about the
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Go ahead.
So basically, I'm from SEN and I wrote about Third Desert. There's an issue of water scarcity, so I wrote about it. That people do not have access to water for their daily life and basic purposes like drinking water, and then they have to drink contaminated water, underground water, which is not good for health. And I think this should be addressed at the earliest. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. How about, where is the name here? Shifa, how about you?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Shifa.
Yes, I have written about plastic pollution because mainly I have been petting fishes and tortoises since childhood. So I really care about marine life. and I read up a lot on plastic pollution and how it affects marine life. So I pointed that out, and even I read a research paper where it mentioned that plastic decompose into micro particles, which will eventually end up in our food chains as well. So we need to address this before it starts hurting us in the long term.
You've hit the nail on the coffin. So basically, I am working, my research is on microplastic pollution. And hopefully I'll give you a glimpse of that in the class at some point. I'll share some of the techniques that we've used to quantify microplastic. The bad news is that we took samples from Ravi in the summer, and we were able to spot. We just need to quantify it. So basically find out if it's exactly plastic, but we were able to spot a lot of thread-like structures that looked like plastic. And all of these things that we're talking about, they're real, they're around us. It's just that we do not know. And I think this is why platforms like these, discussions like these are important, because unless we know the problem, we're not going to be able to find a solution. And I hope that through you, we can educate, like all of you can go back to your home, your friends, your communities, and then educate more people on how grave the situation is and why all of us need to be the agents of change that this planet needs. I can now go to maybe Daniel's example on garbage in River Jhelum. Daniel, are you with us? Okay, maybe Daniel's not around. How about Roja? Roja, are you with us? Can you talk about your issue? I just want to take a diverse set of examples. Yes, you are.
So climate change is something that I'm really concerned about, as all of us should be. And glacier meltdown and the loss of the water bodies is something that's one of the irreversible side effects of climate change. We have deforestation and everything else as well, but there are still solutions to that somewhat. But glacier meltdown is something that is inevitable at this point, especially with the new IPCC report saying that we've already surpassed the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark and we're closing in on the 2-degree. So in Pakistan especially, there's a lot of inverse effects of that with flash flooding and the northern areas as well as the delta regions. So it's transforming the topography, displacing the people. So I feel that it's one of the most relevant side effects that we as a nation face due to climate change.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. These are all very relevant, and these are all the things that we are going to be talking about in the class as well. So hopefully this experience is beneficial for you. A lot of you, and last year this was really popular as well. Raise your hand if you use the Lahore smog as the issue that concerns you the most. Because I know there were a lot of these. And last year, I think the Lahore smog was really popular in the class as well, which is why you will see a lot of smog and smog-related discussion in the class, and hopefully in the air pollution control techniques. And in general, we'll talk about how can we control this from the regulatory point of view to an individual habit. We can go to the case of I-8 Islamabad.
Acha, so that's the one I did, ma'am, or अच्छा, so I wasn't really sure कि इसको किस तरह करना चाहिए because again I feel like कि this isn't like one of the bigger environmental crises. लेकिन I just pretty much saw I8, right? Or I8's been like an area I've lived in for like the past 6 or 7 years, and in the last few years like it's been completely empty. जो उसका मरकज है that was like used to be devoid of like shops, बहुत थोड़ी थोड़ी होती थी basically, और उसके आसपास के एरिया तो वहाँ इतनी कंस्ट्रक्शन भी नहीं होती थी. But like over the past 7 or 8 months, they've been constructing a lot, like बहुत ज़्यादा shops ये वो, और जो empty parking lots होते थे, they were like pretty much filled with cars. और काफ़ी ज़्यादा मतलब I just felt कि जो noise air pollution थी वो तो ज़्यादा हुई है, but also there was like different ways in which जिस तरह construction हो रही है तो उसमें there was like a lot of debris being emitted and that wasn't being controlled or looked after सही से. But I just thought कि IED is just one of those places in Islamabad which has been काफ़ी ज़्यादा affected and this could just be the start of something. Like ऐसा हो सकता है कि this situation just worsens.
Absolutely. And I think one of Pakistan and the world's biggest problem is that because opportunities are centered in the urban centers, the urbanization and the rate at which our cities are urbanizing without any proper planning, I think that makes it worse, right? That when you plan a city, you plan its solid waste management, you plan its wastewater treatment, but we plan a city first. So we build all of these housing societies first, and then think about the problems, then think about the water demand. And of course, a city would then face water scarcity, a city would then face wastewater problems, solid waste problems. And that's exactly what's happening in the case of Pakistan. And I hope we can discuss this because I know last time I didn't put anything like that. Yes, Asa, do you want to continue? Do you have another?
Ma'am, I just had like a question. Okay, I've been noticing like obviously जो urban areas होते हैं, you want to develop them as much as possible. You want to like increase all the opportunities. लेकिन why is this form of like environmental damage not really taken that seriously? Because आपके जो obviously जैसे हमने देखे हैं remote areas वगैरह में जो मसले हो रहे हैं, उनके ऊपर तो like obviously the government is focusing. लेकिन ये I feel like एक बड़ा subtle तरीका है and this tends to get neglected a lot. Like how do people tend to like combat this particular sort of environmental damage?
I said, that's a question that I asked myself when I moved from Gilgit to Islamabad, Pindi, and this is a question that I keep asking myself even today. And that is, how do you city folks, how are you okay with the wastewater nala passing by? And I say this because all of you are Islams. Like, how are you okay with a wastewater stream passing by your home when you know its health implications, right? How are you okay with breathing an air that you know is the dirtiest in the world? And how are you okay with solid waste and the garbage lying around in the park that is closest to your home when you know it has implications? For example, as Shifa said, it's all the plastic that we throw around that then divides into these smaller pieces that get into the food that we eat. I think it's the reason why nothing's happening, and the reason why we are not doing anything is because we've all, at an individual and as a city and community level, we are okay with what we've made peace with pollution, and that's why all of us in this community is important, because we need to be tensed, we need to be loud, we need to be as angry as people like Greta, telling our governments, telling our institutions, telling the capitalists that it's not okay for you to continue to over extract the resources and over pollute the planet. And urbanization is, because I think for countries like us, the growth is the focus. And that is why I don't think they're worrying too much about the cities and how they're planned. And for a lot of people who are moving to the cities, like, I don't have anything against people and the choices that they make, because I have moved from, for example, a mountain community to a city and then to a bigger city, and for opportunities I've gone wherever I've gone in the world. But these are the things that are important, and I will not say that there are no laws against it. There are rules and regulations that restrict all of this, from international to local, which we'll talk about in the rules and regulations of how we need our cities to be living in harmony with nature. We want our cities to be, okay, there's a lot of man-made structure to it, but we want it to not destroy. So I think someone mentioned E11 and how we basically filled all of those streams that were supposed to take all the water, like they act as a watershed, like, so they transport the water when it's in excess. We filled those, we built a housing community. What were we expecting? Whenever there was ample rain, it was going to flood, and that's what it did. And with climate change, we can't even predict when there will be a sudden rain and intense rain. And I don't think I answered your question, but I think the answer to your question is that all of this is happening because we don't care. We don't care at an individual level, we don't care at a community level, and we do not care at national level. When we start caring, I think something will change. But interesting discussion, guys. Thank you. I had allocated very little time, but I'm enjoying the discussion. So I'll take a few more. Maybe we can go to the Amazon rainforest discussion, because it's probably the only international one. Do we have Shireen with us?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are, Shireen. Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically it was just like, I didn't really mean the Amazon exactly, but it's one of the biggest examples. I meant forest fires that are caused by humans, because I feel like, especially these days, those are like the most common issue we see everywhere in the US, in Australia, in Turkey, everywhere there are forest fires. And like mostly they're not really being caused by natural events. They're being caused by human activities because they want to clear land. And which is very sort of dangerous for the environment and for us, because not only are trees not um, converting carbon dioxide to oxygen, but they're also releasing so many greenhouse gases into the air because the wood is burning, and they're basically clearing all the things, the natural wildlife and everything, because of the trees burning down. I think that's it.
Thank you so much. And yes, I agree. If there was any year that was sort of like a wake up year, it was definitely since the pandemic, these 2 years, and particularly this year, where when I opened the news in the morning, if there wasn't a forest fire in one part of the world, there was flood in that part of the world. Even now, if you look up some of the places, almost all the urban centers, for example, Nepal recently faced flood. Turkey was facing flood in one part and then facing forest fire in the other. So it's like super wet in one place and then super dry in the other to cause forest fires. But then also, again, I don't know if you see, a lot of this comes from mafias that want to operate the way that they operate. And very often the forest fires and the deforestation and the clearing of land comes from people who either want the land for construction, for even food security and agriculture. They're clearing these forests. Some people do that for timber. Some people do it because there is money in poaching, and these areas have rich wildlife. And there are a lot of reasons for, even sometimes it's natural, right? They're super dry seasons and they spark the forest fire, but sometimes they're human interventions in order to achieve their own motives. And I think that's more saddening than the actual causes of the forest fire. And it's true that we face too many of them, and we still are facing it. And that means that the carbon dioxide or the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are only going to increase. And we are probably losing a lot of the rich biodiversity that this planet had. So I will not take another example from here. I will allow one of you or any one of you to raise your hands and talk us through about what you've put there, in case I missed it while I was scrolling. Oh, I love it when people raise their hands. Okay. Arij, we can go to you, and then Zainab, and then Zain.
Assalamu alaikum, ma'am. So I wrote about the Siachen Glacier because we all know the geopolitical location of it, and the fact that because of global warming, the rise in temperature, we know that a lot of glaciers are melting. So because the Siachen Glacier, it is an active fighting zone, and a lot of Pakistani and Indian soldiers are stationed over there. In the past, we've seen that any avalanches that have been triggered because of the rise in temperature, they've claimed a lot of lives of both Pakistani and Indian soldiers, a lot more than active fighting has. And because obviously it is one of the most strenuous battlefields in the world, not just in Pakistan, and the fact that there's all this fighting going on there, and already the weather conditions are so precarious because of the global warming and the rise in temperature. I think these regular avalanches or storms, they're making the lives of these soldiers stationed on these positions a lot more difficult. So I thought this, because we all live in Pakistan, this is definitely like a concerning area for us. And if the government does not allocate any resources to mitigating the damage in this particular area anytime soon, then we'll obviously be losing a lot of lives. And in a report that I read, it also mentioned that a lot of the soldiers are losing their lives over here, and it's the act of fighting itself doesn't claim as many lives as the environmental or other hazards do. So yeah, that's what I wrote about.
Brilliant. Thank you. And now you can see how diverse the problems are getting, right? And a lot of times the science students in the class think, what's the role of a non-science student in an environmental sciences class? Sometimes, for example, recently you might have seen a lot of posts about the environmental impacts of the war on terror in Afghanistan, and how there was this whole event has caused so much environmental pollution and damage. And something that we'll talk about in the class is the intersectional, sorry, electricity is out, the intersectional environmental or the intersectional environmentalism, where yes, the air quality is poor around the world, but how does that poor air quality impact the poor people more than the rich people? Depending on what they can afford. So maybe they can afford to put filters, they can afford to wear better masks, they can afford a better healthcare. And so automatically, like even within this environmental issues, there's a whole intersection, and there's this concept of environmental injustice, where, for example, sometimes the women get more impacted than the other genders. And it's also interlinked, and it's also interdisciplinary, and I think multidisciplinary, that we need all of these voices and all of these sides of the negotiations and the debates to come on and talk, because then only then would we be able to solve the problem. So yes, everyone's being impacted, and everyone's being impacted differently, and that's what we need to take into account, like I said, to solve the problem. We can go to you, Zainab. I think Zainab was the next person.
Okay. Am I audible?
You are.
Okay. So I wrote about Nazar Valley, which is north of Sanza Valley. I basically took a trip there like a week ago, and I was talking to one of the Jeep drivers, and all that he was talking about is that like all the pine forests and the juniper forests there are being cut down, like at a very drastic level, which is causing like, obviously it's causing a lot of landslides, and when there are landslides, it blocks all the roads. And what happens then is that the people there, the locals there, their only way of earning is by tourists coming to their place, right? So when there are landslides and when the roads are blocked, there is no way for them to, interact with other people and, like run their businesses, because like summer is the only time that people come to their valley, right? So even while I was going there and all of the, journey towards the famous lake, most of these forests were completely wiped down. And especially like there was this place there, and it has an enclosure with like the only snow leopard in Pakistan. And even the area around the enclosure did not have like a lot of trees. And honestly, the snow leopard seemed kind of distressed by everything that's happening, right? So that's just what I wrote about. It really like, was a wake up call for me that there's like even places in Pakistan like which are mostly untouched are just being wiped down at a very fast level, and something that we need to take care of before everything goes to well.
And then that's also something that we want to highlight in the course as well, that you do not have to be a party to the pollution to be impacted by it. All of this, our contribution as dwellers, for example, of the North, our contribution to pollution is next to zero. And the way we are impacted by all of the environmental pollution and the climate change is probably the highest because of how critical the ecosystem is, and because of how pollutants have the ability to transport with air, which is again something that we'll talk about. So do not think that any action in one part of the world does not impact any other action in another part of the world. And that is why it's important for us to be mindful of our actions. And thank you for highlighting that bit. Zen, you're probably the last participant I'll take because I needed to rush you through some of the basic definitions. I'll see what I can do, but I think you're probably the last person I'll take today.
Yeah, and thank you so much, ma'am. So I will keep it short. So in Bhalwal, there's this sugar mill that has affected the citrus plantations around its area. Basically, back when the mill was not there, the areas were known for cotton production. But since the mill became there, and the industrial waste from the mill, they become part of the streams. Those streams that used to like irrigate the lands. Cotton was just like extended from that area, and now the citrus, like Pakistan, Sargodha is said to be the California of Pakistan due to citrus production, but now it's also being affected because the production of the citrus and the quality of the citrus is now under what you can say under an impact due to this huge environmental change.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for participating and for taking part in this. I hopefully have another Padlet to do in the class. Let's see if we can do it or whether I'll give it as a take-home assignment. We'll now go a little, like we need to talk why we're here, right? Although I've done that informally a lot, but generally in a course on environmental sciences, we want to know how life has thrived, because a lot of people do not care because they think life has thrived for so long and we're capable to survive. It's important for us to know how different species have survived in order to make sure that life continues on the planet. And then also on how we interact in the environment. And only then, like knowing the issues is important because only then would you be able to solve those issues. Only then would you be able to know how can you treat those issues sustainably and live sustainably to make sure that that the planet is in a better state. So I bring this course to everyone. Of course, it would make it easy for me if the audience is uniform, and because then I'll not have to worry about who knows what and how to make it more engaging for everyone. But because this is an interdisciplinary field, because it requires for all of us to look at the different lenses, which I think you were able to get a glimpse of when people talked about the issues that mean the most to them and make them want to do something, whether it's something that they discovered recently or whether it was something that they've been living with in their cities, it's important for us to know that interaction. And that's why this course is conceptualized, and that's why all of you being in this platform is really important. And I hope that we can do something towards the end of the course. But what is environment, right? For a lot of people, it looks as if it's, it is very, very, very complicated. But whichever room you're sitting in at the moment, just look around you. Everything that is not you, and by the way, this is what Einstein said. Everything that is not you is your environment. The air, the air-conditioned air that's coming in, the plants, the books, the tables, everything that I am in at the moment is my environment. So environmental science would be sort of looking at the science behind all of that. So even looking at the marker that I have with my whiteboard and thinking, what does that marker contain in terms of ink and plastic and the different components of it? Where does it come from? Where would it end up? How would it impact the different people and the different species and the different spheres of the environment that it would come in contact with? With that whiteboard marker that I use in my office, how long would it remain on the planet since it's made out of plastic, probably like many generations far ahead of me. So environmental sciences is sort of looking at all of these things beyond, you being the center of it, looking at everything around you, looking at your consumption patterns, and looking at how they will impact your biotic life, so the living around you, but also the non-living around you as well. And we talked about cities, right? A lot of our cities are, man-made environment. They're not natural, but then they are our environment. That is our reality, which is why we need to understand it as well. So there's a natural side to it, which is more biology focused, where we'll look at the living and also, of course, the non-living, because soil, air, all of this is there and it's naturally there, So we'll look at those. And then within life, we look at life on the land and life below water as well, because these are all super critical for the ecosystems that we live in. And changing one means changing a lot in the environment. But you will also come across terms like ecosystem a lot. And I thought that I owe you an explanation as to what's an ecosystem and what's environment. Environment is essentially everything around you. Ecosystem is a little more focused. It's a little more area bound. And it's a little more specific in terms of the species or number of species that will be living in a defined area. So let's say all the LUM students living in LUMs create an ecosystem where we'll have plants, animals, microbes, if there are any. And then we'll also have the physical environment, which is the soil, air, etc. So that's the small ecosystem. And then environment is way broader and way bigger than that. It's way more complicated. So ecosystems, we sort of in environment come down and focus at the ecosystem level to understand it. But it's a component of the environment. It is not the environment that we'll be talking about. In an ecosystem, generally, we have species that can produce food, so plants that can consume food, people like us, and then species that can decompose, so different mushrooms, different insects that contribute to it. They're all a part of your biotic or living side, and then the abiotic would be air, water, fire, sun, solar energy, whatever, however you want to put it. So a little bit of explanation on what ecosystem is and what environment is. Like I said, environment is way more complicated and way more bigger, and that's why an understanding of it is really important. It sort of says the same thing, but just to remind you that environmental sciences is not for scientists only. We don't just talk about the biology, chemistry, and geology. We also talk about the geography, the politics, the policies, the regulations, and so the social sciences side of it is as important as the natural science side of it, because without that, we cannot really do anything. But then also the humanities. I struggle a lot with how unethical people are. And I think that's also something that that's important for us as participants of this particular course and class, is how do we create ethical individuals in order to drive behavior change? Because for me, I think the most difficult thing has been to drive behavior change in people. And in order to see how we have survived, it's probably important for us to know how we interact between each other. So let's say we take this small ecosystem. We talked about how certain species interact with one another, how one is important for the survival of the other, and how there's this web, this complicated food web that makes the interactions so much more beautiful than they actually are. But then how are the physical components really important? So, we talked about the interaction between the physical components and the biological components. For this particular food web, let's say there are these physical components, and then right now we are talking more about us and with our lens, because we seem to be the biggest manipulators of the planet. A lot of the issues that we'll look at, or we're going to be looking at, are the major cause of it is human being, the anthropogenic activities, or however you want to put it. It's the people, it's the human beings, it's us who've been probably like a powerful species that's trying to destroy the planet at a pace that the planet is not ready for. But I think in terms of survival, in however many years we have survived, and in the next lecture, we'll look at the evolution of the Earth, which is something that I've added this year. It wasn't there last year, just to see how new we are on the planet, but the power that we're holding currently on the interactions and the survival side of things. So I think I'll probably like stop at some point and maybe get you to do the other things. But the important thing is, like I said, environmental sciences derives on sustainability. We want to make sure that all the natural environment and man-made environment that we have created lives in harmony, is able to thrive, is designed such that it doesn't destroy, but becomes a part of the existing planet. We also have to kind of make sure that we live such that the resources are not depleted. So you might have seen how these urban gardens in many parts in the world act as sanctuaries for living things, act as space for corridors for birds to go through from a certain place to the other, because these artificial wetlands and these artificial parks, or man-made parks, not artificial, how they've given a space for the animals that are migrating or the birds that are migrating to come, how they've provided a space for bees that are really important for pollination and therefore survival of the planet. So it's, you know, cities are not always bad. Of course, we need them for our own living and growth, but cities can be designed very, very sustainably. And if they're designed sustainably, hopefully have a positive impact on the planet. So the focus of this course will be on living sustainably in the planet, not exploiting the natural resources, and making sure that we have enough for our future generations. A quick recap, that within sustainability, we'll be looking at, and we'll be doing this in the next few courses. Some people have difficulty, I think, with internet because they keep coming back. We'll look at the biodiversity because, you know, those species, all this beautiful web, the web that we saw, it's important for survival of the planet because it regulates a lot of the mechanisms. For example, if decomposers go out, a lot of the waste, a lot of this, everything around us will not perish, and then it will just pile up, and we'll probably have a city that's full of waste, or whether natural or artificial. And then we'll talk about the cycling. These chemical cycles are important for us to have it, whether it's from carbon dioxide perspective or some of the natural elements that we need for our survival as well. And a lot of this is driven by solar energy. So you'll see solar energy sort of being the highlight of everything that we do. Okay, so I think maybe we'll see how far we can go, but I now wanted to start a discussion about the natural capital. And I do not want to sort of define it, but I can just tell you this, that in the environment, we have a lot of things that are there. And maybe before I start talking about it, I can tell you what you're supposed to do. So hopefully you know where the annotate function in your Zoom is. So if you go in the view options and then go to annotate, you should be able to write on this screen. I want you to think about the services that a single tree has for in your life, in your communities, in a park, you know, wherever you can think of a tree as a contributor. Basically, what I want you to think of is that there are all of these natural resources, right? For example, a bee that has such a crucial role to play in pollination, in survival of life on this planet. They are a capital, right? They are a resource. We do not pay the trees. You cannot find the, okay. So if you go in the view options, there should be annotate as an option. And if you go to annotate, it will say text, and then you can do that. If you do not, if you're not able to find it, I don't know, maybe some phones don't allow it or whatever, then you can write it in the chat box. We'll read it, okay? So basically you need to tell me what are some of the services that you think a tree has in your life, in the lives of people around you, and, you know, for the planet, for other species as well. And just to make it easy for you, I have divided it into 3 categories, which is the economical, societal, and environmental benefits of a tree. And we'll look at some of these in the next slide. Essentially, what I want you to think about is that, how many times do we walk past a tree and say, thank you, tree, for doing this for us. I don't think we are grateful for the services and the resources that nature has given us. And I think that is why it's okay for us, and particularly our generation, to exploit it. If we understand how important the role that a particular resource plays in our life, we will never, I will think 1,000 times before cutting down a tree if I were aware of the different services that it does or plays in my life, and that's without repaying the tree anything, right? We're not paying the tree for working for us 24 hours in the day. So I think it's something that I want us to be cognizant of, to look at the role of every species in the planet and understand why it would be important to keep those species intact. Some interesting points: it stabilizes the soil. Yes, it holds the soil. So whenever there's flood or erosion, it basically prevents that. It's a nest for bird, habitat for birds. Absolutely, it prevents floods. Yes, and it cleans the environment. The number one, wherever you plant a tree, it basically makes sure that you have cleaner air. In our culture, it's probably like the shade part of it also becomes really important. In a cold, wet England environment, it probably is not as cool as that, but I think it still is a space for motivation for most of us. Let's look at the societal benefits. Maintains the water table. Yes, absolutely. Oh, you guys are intelligent. I like you already. Beauty, landscaping, absolutely. So the peace of mind. So something that we'll talk about also is how a better environment, because you guys talk about this particular generation, this particular time is very critical of the mental health and the mental well-being of people. And I think because we have compromised on life and greenery and a lot of things in our day-to-day lives in the cities is the reason why we are mentally so distressed all the time. So the role that these spaces play as places of solace, or I don't know how to, or of reflection, of dwelling in self, of peace, I think that's really important. It regulates the pH. Some very, very, very interesting answers, and it's brilliant. So it gives food, fuel, and fruit, and all of that. Yes, but we also have to think that as long as that is being done sustainably, as long as parts of the tree are being cut to get paper without cutting down the paper completely, it's okay. It can be called a sustainable service. But if we are uprooting the tree, then probably I don't think I would call it a service at all. Employment for people. Yes, I think depending on where the tree is, it can provide employment for the people. Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for taking part in this. Maybe we can, I don't know, do I need to clear all and then move to the next slide? Okay, yes. So I put a few here for you, just for you to have a look. And again, most of you had put this there already, and there are examples. Because of my bias, I've only filled the environmental side more. From improving the temperature or regulating the temperature, reducing the noise pollution, acting as barriers to, as some of you mentioned, reducing stormwater, reducing flooding, and sequestering carbon, fixing carbon, bringing carbon back to the soil where it belongs, and reducing carbon from the atmosphere, giving us oxygen, giving us clean air. They're all services, and then improving biodiversity and giving habitat to some of the biodiversity that we talked about. And this is a question for the economics students, because I find myself really conflicted when we talk about what would be the price of cutting down a tree, because I think that's something that the economics people deal with, right? And as an environmentalist and as someone who has a lot of ethical issues with cutting down a tree, I will never be okay. Like I will not put a price on cutting down the tree. And I think that's why that side of it is important. Can you put a monetary value to everything? Can you allow industries to continue to pollute and say this is the amount that you pay to a country in terms of corporate social responsibility or whatever, and it would be okay for you to extract their resources? I have a lot of ethical conflict or moral conflict with the way things are set. And I hope that the next time you sit and monetize something, monetize an environmental issue, you think about all of these services and how much money does it deserve if you wanted to monetize it in that way. Because I think these services are endless. Like it's like acting as a machine, but then the machine was created by God, I don't know, whenever the planet was created. And we have it right in front of us, but we are compromising on this service to kind of get ourselves a few others. And, it doesn't really make sense. So is it true that we only have 2 minutes before we wrap up the class? Tell me it's not. Transport corridor. Yeah. Okay. So basically, if you have, pardon, let me close this, annotate. So if you have looked at the, for example, birds that come from, have you looked at like the nice swans, I think, that come from Siberia to Soon Valley during the winter? And that's because at a certain temperature, they cannot survive in those parts of the world. There are a lot of transportation routes for birds from India to Pakistan as well. So if you, for example, someone mentioned going to Naltar recently. If you go, for example, to lakes like Borith Lake in Upper Hunza, you will see certain birds in certain time in the world, in the year and in the calendar. And that's because, they have either their own patterns of migrating to another part of the world for their own survival. And that's just the way that they do it. They go all the way and then come back to their spaces, or they move from one place to the other for their survival. But those transportation corridors are important for those species to survive. And hopefully we'll talk about this a little more whenever we have time. But if those corridors, let's say if like a bird was to move from, for example, Karachi's coast to the north of Pakistan, and then in the way it comes across various towers and then cities that they don't have water for the birds to rest or any plants for the birds to rest, the bird will probably end up dying or becoming very weak and eventually eaten up by whoever's up their hierarchy of food web. And that would impact the population of that particular bird. And as we said, every species has a very critical role to play in the planet. So yeah, you can say resting space for the birds, or maybe depending on the temperature, like where they want to live. But I definitely want you to look up Soon Valley and how Russian birds migrate in their winters to Pakistan during that time, purely for survival, I think. Ooh, okay, so is it time? It's time, right? So we've reached the end of the class, although I haven't reached the end of the lectures, but I'll send you another link about calculating your ecological footprint which we were supposed to be doing in the class, but I love the discussion, so I wanted to give more time to that. So I'll send you the link as soon as the class ends, and I hope that you will end it. Any comments, any questions, you're more than welcome to put it through now.